My name is Jess Larson, and I am meshIQ's events manager. I would like to welcome everyone attending, as we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. In case you don't know, we present monthly webinars on different middleware technology topics that are part of our Tech Talk series, and today is the 8th Tech Talk this year. At the end of this presentation, I will include links to watch past Tech Talks on demand in case you missed any of the previous webinars. So today's topic is Apache Kafka latest trends and techniques. After meshIQ exhibited at the Kafka Summit London a couple months ago in May, it was very evident that Kafka continues to grow in popularity with the size of that crowd. In this presentation, we will be reviewing the key trends and new key features that are driving this adoption and how it will affect you and your organization. Also, feel free to send any questions you have throughout the presentation in the chat box for the Q&A portion at the end of the webinar. Before we start, I would like to introduce our two wonderful speakers today from the meshIQ team. First up is Navdeep Sidhu, CEO of meshIQ, and driving innovation and integration observability for our business. Our other speaker today is Richard Nicola, Vice President of Development and Support. He is responsible for the entire development lifecycle of all meshIQ products. I will now pass it over to you, Navdeep, to get started.
Let's get started. It's a very exciting topic. We at meshIQ are very positive, very enthusiastic about Kafka. We are seeing the use cases and a lot of trends, a lot of new innovation happening. So we thought we will do a webinar on the trends and techniques. So let's get started. So as Jess mentioned earlier, thank you all for joining our Tech Talk session today. I'm sure you have joined in the past and some of you are familiar with meshIQ and our mission. But in case you're not, this is what we do. We are an observability platform built for integration mesh, and mesh stands for messaging, event processing, streaming, deployed across hybrid cloud. And if you're involved in integration, also known as middleware, in your current role, I am sure you will understand what it means. And if not, I will try to explain these terms as we go along. Messaging is MQ or MQ-like technologies such as MSMQ, ActiveMQ, etc. Event processing refers to EDA technologies such as Solus, TIBCO, web methods. And streaming refers to Kafka and other data streaming technologies such as Pulsar. And any number of these technologies can be deployed on a hybrid cloud architecture, hence what we call mesh. So as a company, we provide observability and management across all these messaging, event processing, and streaming technologies, no matter where they are deployed, on-prem, cloud, or both in a hybrid mode. So we'll get started with today's topic. And Kafka Summit London, very exciting event, 1,500 live attendees, 2,000 plus virtual attendees from 50 plus countries. And we are going to talk today about the latest trends and techniques in Apache Kafka and the best way to understand where the Kafka community is headed, to meet the contributors, because it's an open source, meet the open source contributors, vendors, developers using Kafka at the Kafka Summit, which was in London this year. And the great news is the community is growing. It's growing extremely well. There's a tremendous innovation happening, and we will capture some of the highlights here, and then we will summarize the trends and techniques later today as well. And as just mentioned, Richard Nicola, who's our VP of R&D, will talk about the trends and techniques and also a little bit about what we do. So at a high level, Kafka is getting adopted in all types of industries. Over 150,000 organizations globally use Kafka, and the Kafka meetups are attended by over almost 70,000 attendees globally, and there are 68,000 plus Stack Overflow questions on Kafka. So needless to say, this is one of the widely adopted, fastest growing market segments in the software industry, and the #1 leader in streaming. So as I mentioned earlier, the Kafka Summit London was very well attended. And over the years, we have actually seen that this is getting more traction every year. We are seeing more vendors, the ecosystem is growing, we are seeing more developers, different use cases, a lot of government entities, which are typically not at the cutting edge of technology, are attending and adopting Kafka as well. It is very exciting to see that innovation and the ecosystem growing. All right. So we at meshIQ, as you can see from the screen, we were a proud sponsor of this year's event as well. We were also a sponsor last year. And you can see our team in action. We had great interactions with Kafka developers and a lot of lively engagements with, which are very useful as we continue to enhance our Kafka capabilities for the Kafka users, and also learn from the real life use cases talking to the developers in person. All right, so there's a lot going on in the Kafka ecosystem. So we will focus on some of the announcements from the Kafka Summit, and then we will go deeper into the trends and techniques as well. So at the event with this magnitude, there were several significant enhancements around key features. We will try to capture all of them in the next few slides. This is just a summary of what is coming next. We will start off with the general enhancements to Kafka, followed by the newly launched Cora engine for the cloud. Then we will cover the stream processing engine, namely Flink, and then the newly announced early program for Flink as well. And finally, we will discuss some brand new capabilities that are coming your way, and then we will switch over to trends and techniques. And Richard Nicola will take you into some of those deeper trends and techniques as well. All right. So Kafka has humble beginnings. It was a simple commit log, and now it is becoming the enterprise streaming platform for organizations across each industry. Personally, I'm very excited at this. I think that there are huge capabilities within the Kafka ecosystem. And then before we get to the major enhancements themselves, let's see how developers and contributors view Kafka, right? It has come a long way from commit log to an enterprise streaming platform. And now they need connectors which connect Kafka to other platforms to basically use it as an enterprise streaming, enterprise integration platform, not just for streaming, but use cases that go beyond streaming as well. And as Kafka users grow, the governance is becoming more and more important. The reason for that is that not only number of clusters is growing, but when you go beyond the streaming use cases to into enterprise integration use cases, the governance is a big topic for those use cases as well. And finally, the data streams that need stream processing, and the area that is picking up very fast and major enhancements are happening is the stream processing area, namely Flink. And there are several other technologies which are used or which are being used by the Kafka developers for stream processing along with Flink as well. All right, so let's cover the significant enhancements first. So some of this will be very technical, and I hope you get it. If not, feel free to ask us questions, and we will respond at the end of the conference today. The first one that you have heard is that Zookeeper is getting replaced, and it's being replaced by Craft, which is the short form for Kafka Raft. And the migration from Zookeeper to Craft is in the preview stage. So it was announced a few years ago, Zookeeper will be deprecated. That moment has arrived now. And the move to Craft is essentially to make deployment and operations much simpler and improve the scalability by 10x, because it is Craft is a much more efficient way of handling the metadata. Zookeeper stores persistent cluster metadata and handles maintaining dynamic configuration and topics, such as partitions and within the topics. So it adds an extra layer of management and complexity, and also slows things down a bit. The storing the metadata internally within Kafka makes it more manageable, and it's better. Uh, it's more efficient and better around guarantees around issues such as versioning, etc. And also the big thing is that if in case you need to recover, you recover much faster in case of shutdown. So Zookeeper is deprecated in 3.5. And if you're still using Zookeeper, I think you should definitely plan to start migrating to Kafka. Some of those migrations are the uh, in the previous stage. And one thing to note down is that you need to be on Confluent Platform 7.4 to be able to use those migration scripts. And the second point here is the tiered storage, which is very important as the data processing and data storage scale independently. So the tiered storage has very interesting origins. The requirement came from Uber, which is a heavy Kafka user, and we all use, or we at least know of what Uber does. So it's a very data intensive platform, and they started off by supporting Amazon S3 buckets. And with the tier storage, now you can use data and send warm data to cost effective object storage with hyperscalers. And you can scale brokers not only when you need more compute resources, you can use AWS S3, Azure Blobs, GCP, and many other cloud providers like Dell, etc. So depending upon what your cloud strategy is, tiered storage is going to help you run Kafka in the cloud and also make efficient use of those storage buckets provided by your cloud provider. And the final topic here is the queues for Kafka. So let's talk about queues. It's a very significant enhancement. We know a lot of companies who are looking at Kafka. Some of them are already using Kafka for queues. Some of them are replacing MQs with Kafka. So the question is, does Kafka replace queuing? The answer is sort of. So Kafka themselves, they are very honest about how they handle queues, and their customers have been asking for queuing technology for a long time. So this enhancement is very significant. As we all know, Kafka is highly scalable for event streaming, but the way they handle consumer group assignments to partitions, it sort of creates a coupling between the consumers and the partitions. So then you have to, if you're a developer, you have to over partition just to ensure they have parallel consumption to cope up with the peak loads. So it's not very scalable in that sense. So the idea of queues here is to have shared groups that have cooperative consumption and that removes tight coupling, right? It is not really a queue in a traditional sense, but it is delivering a queuing mechanism the Kafka way. So it's using Kafka constructs, and it sort of works like queues, but it is not an equal replacement, but it kind of gives you the same functionality. Okay, so you might want to look more into this topic. There are a lot of assets, knowledge sources available on the web, and you can go deeper into this topic as well. All right, so let's switch topics. Let's switch gears. The next one is the biggest announcement from the event, and this is their Cora Cloud engine. The Kafka Cloud, if you look at the history, was announced in 2017, about 6 years ago. And it was Confluent's effort of basically running the open source Kafka on a Kubernetes based control plane with a simplistic billing, some observability, and basic operational controls. And very quickly, Confluent as a company realized that cloud systems are complex. They are completely different in the way they are architected, how they operate, how they leverage the cloud networking, the storage, and the experience they deliver to the customers in the cloud. So Confluent decided to build something from scratch, and it is the Cora architecture. And this is 100% compatible with currently supported versions of the Kafka protocol. It is designed from the ground up to be a true managed service. So the obviously the question is why? Why do we need a new cloud engine, right? So there are a few points. Be multi-tenant first. As we all know, Kafka is not great in multi-tenancy. So Kafka now with this Cora engine, Confluent can deliver a multi-tenant capability to all their customers. It supports thousands of tenants with strong isolation. The second is run across more than 85 regions in 3 clouds. So it is portable across different clouds. And the next point is if you are operating by a small on-call team, then Cora Engine fits perfectly. Confluent can handle thousands of customers with a very small on-call team. So it is very efficient in how it's managed. There's a lot of automation that went into Cora Engine, so it's highly automated, and you don't need manual supervision to run it on a day-to-day basis. And then there are a few other points as well. It actually uh, de-links the individual components within the network. So the compute, metadata, storage layer, they are all separated out. And it also intelligently manages data which is localized within memory SSDs and object storage to maximize throughput while minimizing cost and latency. So cost is a big factor, and I'll go over in a second to show you what's the benefit to the customers, because some of these points they kind of seem like benefits to Confluent themselves, right? So there's huge performance improvements with the Cora engine because it optimizes the cloud environment and the workloads, and also captures the real-time usage to automatically optimize data placement, fault detection, recovery, etc., and optimizes the cost structure for a large scale usage for Kafka. Now, the question is this low latency, the speed, this guaranteed reliability, what does it do? And what does it mean for you? What it means for you is that now you have access or option for cost effective elastic Kafka service in the cloud. You can rely that it is resilient, offers a high SLA, and much better support for cloud networking. It also gives you better boundaries. You can set limits, thresholds, and it will automatically work off of those limits. And there are dynamic quotas for performance limits, which help you maintain your performance as you need from your Kafka streaming engine, right? So there is scaling and the dynamic quotas, boundaries, and auto scaling built in so that you get a high degree performance from your Kafka Confluent Cloud. All right. So with that, after covering Cora, let's talk about 4 major things, and I call them other enhancements, but they are very significant. The first one is around connectors. You can now bring your own connectors, whether you wrote them or you picked OSS connectors, open source connectors. You can run them in Confluent Cloud, which is a big enhancement. Connectors are small, but they are very mighty, and they actually make Kafka fit in and become the enterprise integration platform. They deliver the enterprise streaming, and as they talk to other applications, the connectors make Kafka the uh, the the enterprise integration platform because they connect Kafka to something like Salesforce and any other application that you can think of. In fact, they are the ones who make Kafka more than a streaming engine, right? So the connectors are very important. So Kafka is focusing, Confluent is focusing big on these connectors. Hundreds of OSS adapters are available now. And if you want to bring your own adapter to Confluent Cloud, you can do that as well. And second thing, what we heard discussed was governance, which is becoming very, very relevant. There is a need to tag the schemas, need to trace the lineage, and finally able to validate the integrity of the message. So schemas can now be extended to semantic rules. Examples such as email domain, email address needs to have a domain and at symbol, and does the number of the digits in the phone match the country code? All those can be now be applied with the help of the data quality rules. The third topic here is stream processing, and the need and the use cases for stream processing are growing. Stream processing was another hot topic at the event, and I will not spend a lot of time on this point as we will go into more detail on the next slide, which is on this topic. But to build at a very high level, to build the applications around data streaming, you need to process data streams, and you can either process it yourself or you can use a stream processing engine. So there are a lot of engines in the market today, and they do things slightly differently. Some of them have a lot more capabilities than others, and Flink has a big share in the market. Kafka Streams is also very popular, and then there are options like Spark, Materialize, Hazelcast, etc. And Confluent itself is focusing on Flink, and they have partnered with Flink as well. So the next slide is on that. But let's talk about the fourth topic, which to me is very important. The fourth topic is sharing data externally. And the whole idea there is, if you are running Kafka and your business partner is running Kafka, why can't you hook these Kafkas together, right? And do you need to hook these Kafkas for all the information or just part of the information? So now you are able to share data externally, where organizations running Kafka can hook their Kafka infrastructure together to exchange data. And more importantly, they can share data. They can share selective data, and they can share it securely. So there's an element of security built in, and it has major B2B implications down the road, because if you are able to exchange information securely with your partner by linking your Kafka infrastructure, we think it can down the road replace EDI systems and also give you end-to-end visibility, etc., into those transactions as well. All right. With that, we move on to as I promised earlier, more into Flink. And Confluent is now uh, launching the Kafka Streams, which is available at a large scale. But also, in addition to that, Flink is now available through Confluent Cloud. Flink has a lot more capabilities for stream processing, large set of APIs which have been established in the past, and it is a leader for processing Kafka streams. Now, Confluent Kafka, and Flink, they are available as a fully managed service offering. The capabilities will be launched over the course of 2023 over the year, and we have a brief snapshot here. The early access program has been announced and launched, and the public preview is coming in the fall this year. And then GA will be in winter 2023. And then more capabilities for Java, Python will be launched in 2024 as well. Now, at a high level, what it does is it's an auto scaling, auto balancing, serverless offering, fully managed, automatic upgrades. You can scale from when whatever, zero to whatever you want, and you pay for only what you use. You don't pay for any pre-provisioning type capabilities. So Confluent is very serious, not about streaming, but also about stream processing, because they know a lot of their customers use it. And if Kafka needs to be the de facto streaming behind the application, they need to provide the stream processing capabilities as well. So I know that was a lot to digest, but we are very excited here with all this innovation happening in the Kafka ecosystem. And with that, I will switch over to Richard Nicola, and Richard is going to walk you through some of the considerations which you should have as Kafka developers, and a little bit about what we offer in this area as well. Over to you, Richard.
Yep, thanks, Navdeep. All right, so if we look at the considerations, we put up together a slide. So if you can go to the next slide, there we go. The sort of four different areas that we thought would be interesting to look at in terms of Kafka and the state of things, right? And so, it's always been a question, right? Why do I need to, why should I look at Kafka, or am I looking, you know, at Kafka? What are the motivating factors for it? Well, it's gotten a little bit more challenging now because there are even more things now to consider, right? So, let's go through here and look. So the first thing is going to be, well, gosh, where am I going to run Kafka? So there's been a whole lot of discussion in this about the things that Confluent has been doing in order to make Kafka more efficient in their Confluent cloud environment. So now you have to consider those factors uh, when you're choosing. And of course, one of the key ones is going to be cost, right? One of the key factors, because there are costs either way, right? Whether you run it on premise or you choose to run it in cloud, there's an associated cost. But cloud offerings, of course, we all know are very attractive because they they take the burden of the cost of the hosting and the management of it in order to do that compared to you doing it yourself, right? And I worked for a company at one point, and we used to basically say that any server, even virtual, that they onboarded cost about $10,000 a year. And you might go, well, that's crazy. How can it cost that much? Well, that's because they were considering not only the software, but the management cost, the day-to-day, people costs associated with it. So to them, a minimum cost per year was about $10,000. And we know that Kafka is designed at its root to take a lot of virtual servers. In fact, the more servers you have to spread the work, the better, which is in fact, is part of why you see some of these things that Confluent is doing with Kafka is to make better use of those servers. On cloud, of course, there's, you don't see the complexity that they take care of that. And in fact, they have SLAs to do it. But of course, they charge you for that benefit, right? So you have to make that determination. And then of course you know there's you know, one thing that we ran into is that when you put something on the cloud, it's easy to forget about it, right? Maybe some application you have was decommissioned, but the services that it set up are still running on a cloud instance, and you'll keep paying for them forever. So somebody has to go through and manage those to make sure that that they know what cost you're paying, because cloud costs just keep building and building if you don't manage them. And then of course the a lot of companies are still in a model of saying, well, do we trust cloud or don't we, right? It used to be, hey, no, we could never put any of our data on cloud. But nowadays, it is more acceptable to put data on the cloud, and again, obviously there's, you have to trust the provider, but again, you get a good trusted provider, that's becoming less of a factor. But again, every customer is different, and in classic IT mantra, your mileage will vary. You have to pick which works best for you. Now, if you do choose on premise, we see a lot of customers do like to use something like Confluent, right? Because why? Well, because if you go to the pure open source distribution, you get a lot of DIY stuff, right? You get this, you get that, but oh, you have to set it up and you need to do this. And in fact, if you look at even some of the things that Confluent has been doing, a lot of that came from them running it on cloud and going, gosh, there's probably a better way to do this, right? So doing it yourself is great, and there's a lot of companies that prefer that model, and it's perfectly fine to do that. But if you want those bells and whistles, then somebody's got to do it. You got to pay for it. You have to deal with the fact that, oh, Bob worked on that, but he's not here anymore, and so now you've got to deal with that. And then of course there are other third party. You don't have to go with Confluent. There's Avon. There's others that are IBM Event Streams. Those are all examples of out of the box Kafka wrapped in in a managed service, or a distribution that you can leverage directly. And in fact, it's very likely you'll end up with a mix of some open source, some Confluent, and maybe even some cloud hosted components as well, just depending on business drivers and the size of organization that you work in. The next consideration is, well, what do we do with the stuff that we have, right? So, many of you have IBM MQ, you have EMS, you're just now getting, starting to pick up Solus Pub Sub. Does Kafka replace everything? Do we try to do everything with Kafka? And the answer is probably not, right? I mean, you know, your models are based on evolution. Where you got to today is, based on a lot of factors that went into it. Replacing them is expensive, And the applications we all know are not really typically architected in order to allow you to simply swap out a messaging layer completely. Now, some companies have done that, but even with them, you find that the applications have either direct messaging expectations, or maybe even dependencies on undocumented side effects, right? I know if I get a duplicate message, I get this error and then I do this and that. Nobody's going to be able to look at that externally and know how that application developer was thinking when he wrote it. So it turns out that in many cases that existing applications you have are going to just, hang around for a while, right? And then there's an additional set of Kafka alternatives, something like Red Panda, which is in fact a plug compatible Kafka. So other than, compared to say, someone running an open source version for you, they actually provide their own Kafka engine, but it supports the standard Kafka APIs. That's again a good alternative if you're, looking to save money and resources and still run your existing Kafka applications. And then of course there's a lot of other alternatives, SKS and Pulsar and others are also coming into this play, and maybe Kafka isn't the answer at all. Okay, so now if we look at that and we bring that into the mesh and we go to the next slide, the switch, there we go. Go ahead and do the builds across there while I'm talking, right? The key thing is that in the mesh, there's a lot of different players. You're not going to have just Kafka. You may have, multiple things. You'll have Kafka, you'll have Solus, you'll have ActiveMQ, right? And that's where meshIQ comes into the picture really well, because this is what we've been doing for quite a while already, is dealing with the fact that there's many different messaging services out there. And in order to be able to manage across all of those applications, whether they be on-premise, local applications, cloud-based applications, we have visibility across all of those to do all of the things that we do, right? So again, I'm not going to go through read every bullet item, but as you look across here, managing the configuration, message management, searching, problem solving, analysis, all things that we do as part of managing the integration mesh. Okay. All right. And go ahead and go to the next one. And here again, this is just sort of kind of full cycle now. When Navdeep started, he mentioned, this is what mesh stands for. And as you can see here, this sort of breaks it down into the evolution stages of, your traditional messaging, your event processing engines, your Kafka or your streaming engines, and then where we are today, right? So a great fit to sort of show why meshIQ is here, what we do, and why it's important when you're thinking about Kafka, because you're not going to typically just have Kafka. You're going to have Kafka plus n number of these different things. And then one last picture on the next slide is to show the 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 different areas that we do sort of pictorially, right? So we handle bits of governance, we handle monitoring, we handle configuration, we have introspection, so you can go out and look at your messages, be able to track them, do root cause analysis, see what's going on, diagnosing problems, and of course integrated with a DevOps sort of architecture so that it makes it very quick and easy for everybody to use the tooling. And then finally, a set of intelligence and actions to take that data to the next level. Okay. And that is the meshIQ cloud, or sorry, meshIQ architecture platform in a nutshell. Okay. All right. I think we are. Oh, a quick mention. We do now offer as well the meshIQ platform in a cloud format as well. We also have moved to providing a cloud platform for those of you who want to take advantage of the meshIQ but don't want to run it on premise. You'd prefer to run it as a service. You can use the meshIQ cloud for that. All right, so I think we'll open it up for questions. I know I saw a couple go across already that I think have been answered, but we may want to review the questions. Over to you, Jessica.
Yes, thank you, Richard and Navdeep. So yes, we are ready to start the live Q&A. And so I did receive a couple questions. First being, we are currently using IBM MQ and planning to move to Kafka for new applications. What is your experience with customers that had decided to move away from their legacy messaging platforms?
Okay, yeah, great. Okay, yeah, that's actually pretty similar to the point I was just actually making a minute ago. Our experience has been that it's a very slow process. Certainly people have done it, but for the most part, the process is to bring in, is to take Kafka and use it in new applications, right? There has to be some business justification, and so that's certainly is a key driver. Is how much work is it going to be to go back and redo those work? So again, that's where we run into the cases where people have multiple varying middleware components just simply because of the legacy apps.
One question that was sent in the chat box was, is Confluent in GovCloud yet? And I did see Navdeep responded, but I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, so each cloud provider has their own flavor of Kafka. Kafka essentially is open source, and Confluent is one of the biggest contributors to the open source, and they have their own cloud flavor as well. But you can also get, if you are looking for Gov Cloud based Kafka, you can get it from AWS, Azure, and other providers as well. I gave one example. AWS has MSK, Azure has their own flavor. You can find, if you're looking for Kafka in Gov Cloud, you can certainly find it. Not a problem.
Great. And last question, what makes meshIQ unique when it comes to Kafka?
Wow. Okay. I guess I'll take a stab at that, and maybe Navdeep, you might add a few words as well. But I think one of the things is really the breadth of our solution. If you go back to, and I don't we need to physically go back, but if you review the slide that I put up a few moments ago, just the level of detail of functionality that we have is very broad for Kafka, right? It's also very broad for MQ. It's pretty broad for Solus. It's pretty broad for IBM MQ. So the thing that really makes us unique is both that breadth of information, but the fact that we also support it for not just Kafka, that we support it for all of the components of the mesh. Navdeep, you want to add anything to that?
No, well said, Richard. We support all flavors of Kafka. We are not sticking to one vendor. We understand customers need options, and you may choose Confluent Kafka, you may choose Red Panda, you may choose Ivan. So our goal is to support all flavors of Kafka. And besides Kafka, we treat other platforms as like Solus, MQ, TIBCO, Web Methods, etc. Our goal is to support all of them together so that as you need visibility into Kafka, along with other platforms, we give you an end-to-end visibility, monitoring, observability, and management for all your middleware mesh, not just Kafka.
Great. Well, it looks like we have answered all your questions. If no one has any further questions, we will have this Tech Talk available on demand, posted on our meshIQ website following this call at www.meshiq.com. And as a reminder, we rotate the topics of our Tech Talk webinars and try to focus on different middleware technologies. So we would love to have you join us again. Please be on the lookout for our next upcoming webinar. It is on July 25th, in 2 weeks at 11 a.m. Eastern, on modernizing real-time observability for event-driven hybrid IT architectures. Thank you again, Navdeep and Richard, for your insightful presentation, and thank you to all who joined in. Have a great rest of your day.